Hello everybody. It's a popular opinion that the first series of Warriors is the best, and though fans have pointed out its issues, most can agree that it was a strong introduction to the series. It's been almost a decade since I first picked up Into the Wild, so I decided to find out, do the books still hold up? And while I'm at it, why not reread the rest of the series? Welcome to Warriors Revisited, where I'll be going through every book in the first 4 series and giving it an in-depth review and analysis, as well as picking out various bits of trivia not found on the Warriors Wiki. There will be heavy spoilers, but I assume you've all read the first book. This book is drizzling with atmosphere. Every sentence makes it feel like you're really there, in a shadowy, mystical forest, where a Shadow Clan warrior could pounce out at you at any moment. There's a wild, adventurous feeling I don't remember being there in the more recent books. There seems to be far less regulation, too. Nowhere will you find Lionheart calling out for hunting patrols, or Firepaw tagging along to check the borders. A lot of the time, Firepaw seems to be in the forest alone, and there's a lot less running around. The book doesn't feel the need to have things constantly happen, which can be okay sometimes. Sometimes the characters just need a bit of room to breathe, and the reader's time to enjoy the world they're in. That's not to say nothing's happening. Sometimes just having a talk with your best friend, or seeing the silhouette of a Shadow Clan warrior from across the Thunder Path, can make for a thrilling moment. The characters here are also really charming. You can see hints of relationships here and there, which I unfortunately don't recall being developed in the following books, but it's nice to see it here nonetheless. Bluestar seems to confide in Frostfur a lot, and both are very likable here. Greypaw is funny and good comic relief, while being a good character in his own right. There are so many scenes where he casually breaks the tension by showing up. I'm wondering if it's intentional on his part. If so, Firepaw owes him his pelt tenfold. Occasionally the exposition is a bit clunky. I understand it's the first book, and the world has to be explained to the readers, but there are definitely better ways to go about it. It seems that at every serious moment, Firepaw ruins it with questions about clan life, such as Redtail's vigil and when Yellowfang was taken back to camp. The worst offender of this is when they visit the Moonstone, an action which is pointless in retrospect, because they leave only to learn that they need to immediately return to camp, which wouldn't have been needed if they never set out in the first place. This might have been fixed if Bluestar had learned anything aside from the Shadow Clan invasion, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The biggest issue is that Firepaw's character is way too moderate. He's likable, but the author really doesn't seem to take any chances with him, making him far less interesting than he should be. There are plenty of chances for his development, but they don't really take them. For example, the question of, is the clan where he really belongs? They start setting this up, but it's resolved far too soon. After he decides to join ThunderClan, we never see him having any doubts. Of course, having him prattle on about food and shelter would make him selfish and irritating, but him considering leaving because he seems so unwelcome in the clan might have been interesting to see, or even him reacting more to Sandpaw and Dustpaw's bullying. In the book, he mostly just ignores it, which is a realistic personality to have. It just isn't that interesting. Now, based on this book alone, where I consider him a Sioux, no, he's more or less a realistic character. The way he acts in this book is perfectly believable, and he isn't even that overpowered. He fought back against Greystripe, but it isn't like he hurt him or anything. Greypaw just decided to stop attacking because he didn't think Rusty was a threat. And as for Longtail, Rusty sliced his ear in a surprise attack, and the warrior nearly strangled him afterwards. Bluestar was the one who broke up the fight, and definitely not for Longtail's sake. For Yellowfang, yes, she was a warrior, but she was half-starved and old, and Firepaw had already been training for some time at the time. As for Clawface, it was maybe pushing it a little bit, but Firepaw was nearly a full warrior at the time. I was actually shocked at this. In his first appearance at the gathering, Brokenstar was actually an intimidating and intelligent villain. Having studied history, a lot of the reasoning behind his actions are legitimate to what real-world dictators have said. He gives off a particularly Stalin-esque vibe. It's too bad he only has 2 scenes. It was a huge wasted opportunity not to have him show up to the battle in ThunderClan camp. It's a shame such a promising opening ended in such a whimper, with him being exiled at the end of the book. Of course, it's not perfect. The authors overdo it a bit by having him make 5-moon-old kits warriors. It's evil, sure, but it makes very little logical sense. 5-moon-old kits, trained or not, don't stand a chance against warriors. If they wanted to make him intelligent as well as evil, I suggest 3-moon-old apprentices and 10-moon-old warriors at the least. Another thing they could have done was actually show a little more of Brokenstar's deeds. The Kit Warriors, for example, are barely mentioned in the ThunderClan camp battle, though they did appear at the end. The exiled elders as well were only brought up at the end, so the readers didn't have much time to digest it and despise him as a villain. Her relationship with Firepaw is good. It holds up, though I wish they had more than 3 or 4 scenes together. But in the climax, I can get the impression that Firepaw believes she isn't a bad cat, but there isn't that intimacy that there should be, especially when much of the climax hinges on Firepaw trusting her. I feel like Firepaw's punishment of taking care of her was cut much too short. If he'd been made to take care of her up until he was a warrior, they would have had more time to interact and form the bond that they needed to by the end. The trouble is, the book feels a little unclear as to what it wants to be, and it's really unfortunate, especially in light of all the positives I listed earlier. The first half was a heavy slice of life, and the second was very action-orientated. As a result, both sides feel somewhat neglected. Of course, it's possible to develop both plots well, but much of the first half will need to be cut. It takes till the midpoint of the story for Brokenstar to make his first appearance, when, using traditional storytelling structures, he should have appeared in the first third. Trivia. When Bluestar loses her life in the battle against the rats, Tigerstar sits and waits for her to finish dying before telling the apprentices to fetch herbs. This is a very subtle hint to his villainy, as, if he really cared about her, he would have fetched herbs sooner. Also, Tigerstar knows herbs? Medicine Cat apprentices and Medicine Cats visiting the Moonstone aren't mentioned. After meeting Running Nose at the gathering, Firepaw spoke to Yellowfang as if it would have been surprising that Running Nose would succeed her, implying that initially Medicine Cats had more than one apprentice, or were chosen only after the passing of the previous Medicine Cat. Greypaw says that Bluestar only trains the kits of deputies. Bluestar has had 2 apprentices, Frostfur and Running Wind, and neither were related to a deputy. But this might explain why Redtail was chosen to be a tortoiseshell. There's no mention of Sandpaw being his daughter in the original books, so it's reasonable to assume that the reason for Bluestar not having an apprentice at the time was that her deputy was sterile. And finally, Little Cloud was the last surviving kid apprentice of Brokenstar's reign. I'll leave you to digest that thought.